Welcome back for another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today we're on episode 22, From Frustration to Fulfillment, Harnessing Working Genius for Peak Performance. We've had a couple of episodes discussing the DISC and emotional intelligence assessments, and today we want to dive into working genius. And so today I invited Mike Kenzie to come in and join me today. He's certified to facilitate working genius and has done so several times, and I learned a lot from him about this concept and started to deliver it myself. So I wanted to invite you in, Mike. Thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Sierra.
I appreciate you. So, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Originally, I'm from Michigan. I grew up there and lived there for the first 29 years. Then eventually I went into the military, moved down to Georgia. I was down there for 4 years. Did my 4 years in the 75th Army Ranger Regiment. And then I moved back up to Pennsylvania, where my wife and I and kids are. I have my beautiful wife as well as two wonderful children. My son is 18. He's a senior in high school. My daughter is 13. And I am actually now living down in Virginia. I have a new job down there for the last about 3 months now. And so they're up in Pennsylvania. I'm down in Virginia. And when my son graduates high school, then they'll all move down to Virginia in the Southern Virginia area.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you're in between.
Yeah.
You planned this perfectly so you could spend the weekend back home in PA and then make your way back down south. So thanks for taking time out of the day. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. It's quite an honor.
Oh. Well, I know you've been listening to all the episodes, so you know that there are a couple of questions I ask everyone.
Yes.
The first of which being when you first saw yourself as a leader and what that was like for you.
Yeah. And so I knew this question was coming, so I gave it thought. And really, I feel that you don't define yourself as a leader. I feel that others define you as a leader, right? If they're willing to follow you, then you're a leader. If you have no followers, if you have nobody that's willing to, follow in your lead, then you're just taking a walk by yourself. So that one's kind of hard to really pin down. But I will say it was about probably around 15 years ago when I knew I wanted to be a good leader. Mm-hmm. I had managed people before, but I would not say I was a leader. I had a lot of learning and growing that I needed to do. And that was really when we attended, there was a group of us that went to a leader cast there in Hagerstown. And it was, one of the virtual events, and John Maxwell was one of the speakers, and I had no clue who he was at the time. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, but I really loved how he delivered his message, and it really resonated with me. And so from that point forward, I really kind of dove into leadership and wanting to become a better leader.
That's awesome. I love how I had that same reaction before, too, when I was introduced to John Maxwell. I'm like, I've never heard of this guy. Now when I talk about leadership and I bring up John, I'm like, what do you mean you don't know John?
Yeah, the same
Everybody
way, yep.
knows John. It's so funny. We've come a long way. Awesome. I love that perspective of you don't really identify yourself as a leader, that others would identify that in you. That's really cool. And no one's ever brought that up before. But still, I will throw that right back at you and say, when did you first feel people were following you willingly, not because of a title?
Probably around 10 years ago, I would say. Because as a leader, one of the biggest things you need to do is genuinely and deeply care for the people. Mm-hmm. And I didn't always do that. I've grown as a person, as a leader. I've learned, and I think I've come a long way. I still have a long ways to go, but really, that when I made that change to really care about people, how was their weekend? How was the family? Again, there was a time I didn't, but that really changed my perspective and said, okay, now I feel like I really am a leader.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I feel like a lot of us will ask, how was your weekend? How are you doing? Right. But are you really listening to the answer? And do you really care what they're about to say? So that's awesome that you've kind of shifted and now you do. And I know you just started at a new organization and you had a lot of new people to get to know, right? So you're probably on information overload, getting to know everybody so you can lead them effectively.
Yes. Yeah. And it was interesting. The first day, because I'm an introvert by nature.
Yeah.
And so it's not that I don't enjoy meeting new people or talking with people, but it does drain me. And the first day on the job, the retiring CEO was taking me around. He goes, well, what I typically do every day is go around and say hello to every single person. I was like, oh, wow, that's
I remember your reaction. We were chatting about it. You're like...
And that's great. It really is great that he does that, and that he did do that. And the people do appreciate that. And so I've tried to follow in his footsteps. I'm not 100% there yet. I don't do it every single day, but I try to do it 2 to 3 times a week and get around and say hello to everyone, including folks that are at remote locations, getting out there and saying hello to them and just building that relationship.
Yeah, that's awesome. You don't have to do it daily. I'm glad that you gave yourself permission to, start with a reasonable amount of time spent. Well, I can't even imagine because, how many people are...
There's 55 employees.
Okay, so that's going beyond a surface level, hi, how are you, right? That's a lot of conversation to have every single day.
Yes.
Especially for an introvert. Like the social battery, I can imagine, is non-existent. And you haven't even started your day yet, right? You've just greeted them.
Yep.
I understand. Okay, so let's get to Working Genius and start digging into how folks can use this. So what led you to become certified to facilitate Working Genius?
Yeah, I believe I was listening to one of Patrick Lencioni's podcasts, and they mentioned the Working Genius assessment. I was like, oh, I love assessments. I love learning about this stuff, things like DISC and all that stuff. So I went on the website and went through the assessment, and it made a lot of sense. And it was something that I had not seen before. It was a completely different perspective. It's very different than DISC. So then it was probably 3 months later. They did things a little bit differently. They put the assessment out there. There was no certification you could do. It wasn't even offered. And then it was about 3 to 4 months later that they had the certification. And when I saw it, I was like, that's kind of a little bit of a steep price. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the certification, but I'm going to do it. And so I invested the money, and I was one of the first 40 people ever to be certified in the Working Genius.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Did you?
So I didn't get into the first class. That one was filled up. It was the second class that was in. And that really is why I went through it and said, this is really good stuff, and I think people can use this and benefit from this.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you did, because I received exposure from both you and my friend Larry Moss kind of simultaneously. And you know how much I love DISC, and I've always focused on DISC, and to open my eyes to another assessment that serves a very different purpose, right? I feel like it's part of the toolkit now. It's my go-to. So if you don't mind breaking down a little bit the 6 types of Working Genius and how this is even used, if you can give an overview, and we can pause and talk about the components together, but I'd love to hear you explain it.
Sure. So there are 6 pieces to the Working Genius, and it spells out widget, easy way to remember. So the first one is wonder. And this is the kind of person, this is one of my geniuses. It's the kind of person that does a lot of pondering and thinking about, I wonder what it would be like for this. I wonder what it would be like if we doubled our revenue in the next 3 years. There's no action, there's no answers behind it. It's just a lot of questioning the way things are. So that's the first one, the wonder. Okay. The second one is invention. These are the folks that love to invent things. And not that they want to change things. They want a blank slate. That's what they really love, is a blank canvas to create from. And that's one of my frustrations. I don't like a blank slate, but everybody is different. So that's the inventor. Then you have the discerner. This is the person that enjoys questioning your thoughts and ideas. So they're kind of poking holes and not from a way to get you, or a negative way. It's, hey, let's make this idea better. I have some questions, I have some concerns, and I think we can make this better. So let's work through this.
Right.
So the discerner is really important and is key as you're working on projects, as you're working through things in the environment. And then after that is the galvanizer. This is the cheerleader. This is the person that likes to rally the troops and get people motivated to actually take action. Not that they're going to take action yet, but they're getting ready to take action. Then after that is the enabler. This is the person that they are the ones that get the things done. They like to get the things started and contribute. How can I help? That's the kind of person they are, is they come to you and say, how can I help? You give them something and they go and they do it. Then the last one is tenacity. This is the person that loves to check things off a list. And they will tend to put things on the list just so they can then check it right off. I know that because that is one of my geniuses, and it is what I do at times, because I love to make that check mark. Yeah. So, but that we need that, because that's a person that's going to make sure, did you get everything done that you're supposed to with this project or this task that you're working on? Yeah.
Thank you. That was a great summary, actually. I don't think I could have done that well. So the way that I like to think of it is it's like gears, right?
Yes.
And so you have to have all of the components, right? To go from the moment someone wonders something all the way through the execution, right? The implementation of the idea. And so what I like about it is I can actually see how all the pieces are necessary to take something from start to finish. And based off of the assessment and knowing what areas aren't an area of genius for me, I know I need to surround myself with people that can help me in those areas. So that's how I find it to be helpful. But I know you mentioned one of your areas of genius, or two. Can you share when someone takes an assessment, what that report looks like and how the results are broken down into those categories?
Sure. Yeah, so there's those 6 different areas of genius, and it could be your working genius, it can be your working frustration, and then there's the middle section where it's you can do it, but
you're competent.
Yeah, it slowly will drain you, and that's really what this is about. It's really about what type of work fills you up, right? What kind of work brings you joy, brings you fulfillment? And if it's in your area of genius, you're filling that cup up.
Yeah.
It's something that you love to do, and if you do that all day long, at the end of the day, you're energized. If you're focused in your area of frustration, that is something that drains you very quickly. So that's going to outline that in the report and show you you're going to have 2 areas of genius, 2 areas of competency, and 2 areas of frustration. Everybody has 2. And that's the way that the report is.
Wait. You mean I can't have 3 areas of genius? I tried to before this. Before the episode, and we'll explain it in a couple of minutes, but I was trying to say that I had 3 areas of genius.
Yeah, so that's what the report will show, and it will talk through why it's important to understand, have an understanding of, especially your frustration, but most importantly, the areas of competency, because the area of competency is you don't mind doing it, but it doesn't fill you up, and that's going to drain you very slowly. And what will happen is you're going to be sitting around saying, I just feel demotivated. I feel like, I'm not getting things done, and I'm not sure why. And typically it's because you're working in that area of competency. You can do it, but it's going to slowly drain you.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So remind me, what are your competencies? What falls right in the middle for you?
Yeah, so we'll just go through
Go in order.
the areas of genius is the wonder and tenacity for me. So it's at the two
Front
ends.
and back end.
Yeah, the bookends, I call them, of that. For the areas of frustration, my frustration is galvanizing as well as invention. So those are the frustration areas. And then enablement and discernment are my competencies.
Okay. So how do you personally apply this today? So given this information, you've taken the assessment. Have you done it more than once?
I have. I've done it twice.
Okay. And the results were the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
and I'm saying that because I had shared with Mike before the episode that I took the assessment again, even though your results are not supposed to change. Mine were a little bit different this time, and I was trying to wrap my head around why. But yours was the same both times. And how have you used that information to guide you?
Yeah, it's really on understanding how people like to work and making sure that you can keep them in that area of genius as much as possible. You're going to have to do things that are in your area of frustration, in your area of competency, but if you can minimize that, or more importantly, if you can prepare for that's what I do. So if I have to do some either galvanizing or if I have to do some invention, I can mentally prepare for that and know, okay, I'm going to get drained very quickly, so I'm going to do this for an hour, and then I'm going to stop. I'm not going to sit there and continue doing that for a long period of time. And if you can help surround yourself with people that complement you, so your areas of frustration are their areas of genius, that's going to make a much stronger team.
Right. Well, that's what I was trying to kind of wrap my head around with Mike was my areas of genius before were enablement and tenacity. So I would always take the thing and gather the resources and do it, right? And see it through. And I knew that. I saw that in myself and I love it. I love checking the box, right? And I think what I'm most brokenhearted about is when I took the assessment to prepare for this, again, my tenacity went to working competency. And I'm like, but I know that hasn't changed. The only difference is I have Erica, and I spend a lot more time galvanizing, rallying the troops, getting her excited to do the things that maybe she doesn't even want to do sometimes, right?
Has Erica taken the test?
She has,
okay,
and I'm trying to remember.
But you at least know what those areas
yes.
are, so you can kind of shift things and focus things, and that's really important.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And my frustration is the wonder and invention piece. So that whole front end I'm missing. And that's why I have to tap into like the creative people around me that do stop and question and bring ideas to the table. Because without that, I just like if someone would deliver tasks to me all day, I would just do them all, right? But with no sense of direction.
Yeah.
So I have to force myself. I think that's why my reflection that I do with my full focus planner and stuff, and I force myself all the time to reflect. I think that's because I'm trying to start to question things more, and I know I need to because things will never improve if I don't, right?
Right.
So I think that's why. But I do find it very interesting that now the galvanizing has popped to the top, and tenacity is competency for me.
It can. It's not that it can't change. It just takes a lot for something to change.
Yeah.
Your environment really has to change some way, somehow. And hiring Erica might be what that was to change the environment. Just like with me, where I'm an introvert and having to go around to all the folks every morning, it does drain me, but I love doing it.
Yeah.
I love getting to know the people. I love talking with them, and they're such wonderful people. So it is that going to change me from being an introvert to an extrovert? Probably not, but am I going to be less of an introvert? Is it going to drain me less as I do it more? And the answer is probably yes, it will.
Yeah. And I think it's filling your cup too, because you see what it's doing for them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It doesn't even necessarily have to have a positive impact on you, but you see what it's doing for others. So it's worth it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That makes sense. Okay, so what is the value of doing this within an organization? So we're talking about like individual implementation, but if you're going out and you're facilitating workshops on Working Genius, what is the value to the organization?
It's really having a strong understanding of your team and how well your team works together. I've taken a lot of folks through these assessments and a lot of my own folks through the assessments. I've not done it for the new place that I'm at yet, but that is on the agenda to be done. But you get an understanding of why things are the way they are. And people may frustrate you and you're not sure why. I had that happen to me. I had a guy that I hired that reported to me, and he really frustrated the hell out of me because he always wanted to build things. His solution to everything was, well, we can build it. And that's not what we do.
Yeah.
And when he took the assessment, guess what one of his areas of genius was? It was invention.
Yeah.
And then it all clicked. I said, oh my gosh, I understand why. And it wasn't his problem. It was my problem. I had to change and be more accepting of who he was. So that really brought that to light for me. Could that have happened over time? Yes. But when you do the assessment, those things are pretty spot on.
Yeah.
Whether it's DISC or Working Genius or something else, it's amazing how they do it. I don't know the magic behind the scenes.
I know.
But
I always question that. See, I do question things. But I think that's really helpful to understand, because you needed to understand him better, but you could also make sure the responsibilities on his plate are in alignment with those things that fill the cup, right? So what I've seen with some of my clients when they take the Working Genius, when we sit down and look at their areas of genius, we end up shifting some tasks and responsibilities around to different people based on whatever their geniuses are. And things just flow so much better, right? It's just so much more natural. And it's like, why couldn't we have done that a long time ago, right? You just took the thing off my plate that brings me frustration all the time. And you mean you love to do this, right?
Because a lot of times we don't want to give folks stuff that we don't like because we feel like, oh, I don't want to burden them with that, when they're like, give it, bring it.
Exactly.
Those are things I want to do.
Yeah, switch it off. Yeah, that's the big thing that I've seen is that it has really helped with that. Okay. My next question has to do with the organizations that you've gone into and found that people are working in an area of frustration on a regular basis, but if they don't have the ability to switch to a different role or have different responsibilities, what does that look like? How can the organization still use the information?
That's a hard one, right? and to me, it's more of a long-term plan at that point to say, okay, this person is not working in their area of genius. Let's say they're constantly working in their area of frustration. Then it's a matter of how do you map that out long-term to get them out of that area of frustration? Are there other jobs that might open up as people leave, as the organization grows, that might better suit them to bring them more fulfillment? Because ultimately, as a leader, that's what you want for your folks, is to leave the workday feeling fulfilled, that they've done stuff that they've enjoyed and they feel that they've made a difference.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. So I think you're saying having a long-term plan basically for them, because I see this all the time where a lot of the smaller business owners that I work with, they make a lot of emotional decisions when it comes to hiring, and they end up finding someone that shares their values. They really are someone that's behind that mission and vision of the organization, and they don't want them to leave because they're a good person, right? But then they realize they're not a good fit for that position. So do I keep them long enough to find the thing or create the thing that fits them, right? Or do I now, because we know what their area of genius is, help set them up for success somewhere else and make that connection for them and say, I think you'd be really good at this, you know? I've seen that done as well, and done very thoughtfully, where, you know, you're not a good fit here, but that doesn't mean you're not amazing and you don't bring a lot of strength to the table, but we can't have a position like that for a long period of time. So let me help you find something that is a good fit. And I think I'm always amazed at the leaders that take the time to do that. It's not like, oh, you can't help us, we don't want you, good luck, right? But it's like supporting them throughout the process.
Yeah, and if you genuinely care for the people, you're going to care about getting them into the right position, whether that's within inside the organization or outside the organization. Exactly what you said. But that's also why growing an organization is so important, because as you grow, opportunities come up. The more people you have as you grow, the more leaders you need, and the more opportunities for folks to move around within the organization appear.
Yeah, I think using it throughout the hiring process too, both DISC and Working Genius, and learning more about folks, I always think the people that aren't selected but have still gone through that process, I send them their reports, and it is a tool that they can use to continue to reflect and make sure they end up in the right place, right? So I think that that's really cool, that the employers that are investing in proper screening, right, to find the right fit for them, they end up not only giving them the tool that they need to be successful, but making sure that they're choosing someone that's a good fit for the organization simultaneously. And I think that's like the best of both worlds. So I've always found that the candidates are so very impressed. Like, wait, I get to keep this? I wasn't selected, but you know, it's not going to do us any good, right? It's yours. Use it. Reflect on it. So it's just such a great tool. Okay, I am curious about how you said you have used it in organizations before, prior to this one. You haven't necessarily used it at the new place yet. And we're saying it like it's like a big secret. So he's the CEO of a federal credit union.
Yeah, Bronco Federal Credit
There
Union.
you go.
Yes.
He put it out there. I was like, I don't know why we're avoiding this. All right, you said it, not me. But how have you used it in the past with your teams? But beyond that, what was the response to it is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that I asked the folks at the last organization, that I took them through a lot of different things. We read a lot of different books together, and they said that this was one of the things that had the biggest impact on them, was going through that assessment and talking. And as you take the assessment and you talk through it as a team, and look at, because it'll create a team map to show, you know, how many people you have and what are the different geniuses, light bulbs start to go on, and people are like, oh, I understand why you do that now. And it's not because you don't like me or you're trying to sabotage me or whatever it might be. That's just, you're trying to get to your genius. People want to work in the areas that they love to work in.
Yeah, they're
and
confident
so,
in.
Right. So if I'm a discerner, as an example, which I'm not, but let's say that I am, and we're at the wonder or invention stage, and we're trying to brainstorm some ideas, some concepts, the discerner is going to keep poking holes in it. And you know, that's where, if you have that knowledge of what's happening in the moment, you can say, well, wait a minute, we're not quite to the discernment stage. That's going to come later.
Right.
So, and it's kind of a nice way of saying, hey, stop doing what you're doing so we can focus. Because if you don't do that in a kind way, and you're using common language, then you can really shut the person down, and they're like, well, I'm just not going to contribute anymore at all. But if they understand, oh yeah, that's right, that you're not to my part yet, that I love to do, I just got to kind of sit and wait until you're done, and they're kind of on pins and needles, bouncing around, waiting. But you know, it's a great way to have that common language, and you understand what's going on in your environment, and you can better control how things are happening.
Yeah. No, I like that you brought up the common language piece, because I mean, that's across the board for DISC, or when I'm doing like 8 pillars of trust or Working Genius, whatever it is, right? Once you have the language and everybody in the organization has an understanding of it, I think that it kind of levels the playing field and everybody understands where everyone else is coming from at that point.
Right. It makes a huge difference, and it needs to be throughout the entire organization. And I've seen in places where it was, well, the executives don't need to go through this. So why not? Right?
Yeah.
They're the most
that doesn't make any
ones.
sense.
Because otherwise, there's not going to be that real folks behind it, right? There's not going to be that big push from the top down of support. And that's really what you need, as well as when you're in meetings and you're having conversations. If executives are in there and you're talking this common language and they have no idea what you're talking about,
right,
that can be a little weird.
Yeah. Okay, so something that a lot of people have come to me with before, a question that they have is, should I take my organization through a DISC assessment, or should I do Working Genius? I only want to invest in one right now. Which should I do? How would you approach that question?
Yeah, that's a great, and ultimately they should do both, right there, because they're two very different things. One is more on the personality and behavior. The other is what brings them joy in their work. And it really depends on what are you trying to get the answer to, right? Exactly. Are you trying to understand their personality, their behavior, or are you really trying to understand what type of work brings them the most joy? And that's the question. And if it's about the work and the joy, then you should go through the Working Genius. If it's more about their behavior, more about their personality, understanding who they are as a person, this would be a good option for that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would say the most common need that folks have when they come to me specifically for DISC is, my team doesn't seem to be communicating effectively with one another. Like we don't seem to be on the same page, right? I know they're trying, but the message isn't being received, right? So to me, that's a sign of DISC right away, right? When someone comes to me and says, we're trying to build a healthier culture, make sure everybody's happy with what they're doing, we're going to look at bringing some more folks onto the team, but I want to make sure everybody's sitting in the right seat first, right? And make sure I'm creating the right position to fill. Then I think of Working Genius. Now, what are your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think that with DISC, it's not so much about how you build the team, it's who you have on the team and how they interact with others, what is behind the behaviors that you're observing. And if you can understand the person and say, well, they're not doing that because they're a jerk, they're doing that because they're more direct, their demeanor is more direct, that's just who they are. It makes it a much better working environment, and you can tailor your communication to that person, right? Because it's not about you, it's about how do you then communicate to others more effectively, and you have to understand who that other person is.
Right. Recently, I did DISC for an entire team, and we discovered that there was 0% C on the team. But it was one of those things where it made complete sense, because they had shared they were struggling with, they don't have any structure, there are no processes in place, right? And it made so much sense because they didn't have anybody that was wired naturally to want to get in that level of detail and create consistency at that level.
Yep.
So that made sense. But then I had a team where I did Working Genius with recently, and when we looked at their team map, it was really cool because you could see the business owner is someone who comes up with a lot of new ideas and is excited about them, and then the team is like, we're still implementing the other thing that you brought to the table. Like, can we have more time here? Are we doing this or that, right? And it would create frustration. But once we looked at it, it made total sense. Like, oh, well, that's what he's really good at. He brings it to the table. So what can we do? It came down to discernment. We need to see which ideas are even feasible. Which ones do we want to take all the way through? Or is it just he thought of this and he's really excited about it today, and now, next week it might be something else. So it led to really cool conversation and kind of light bulb moments of, that's why you drive me crazy.
Yep. And that's what you see all the time is people get those aha moments, and the light bulbs come on, and it all starts to click and make sense. And then now you can get to the point where, okay, let's start doing better at communicating, at giving folks work. Let's use this information and make sure we're putting people in their working genius, or if it's on the disc side, that we're communicating properly with that person and how they want to be communicated to.
Yeah. I am curious what the response has been when you've done this before in organizations with the word assessment, because I've noticed before that there have been some folks that as soon as they hear that they're going to take an assessment, right, there's some level of anxiety associated with it, like it's whether or not it's a pass-fail, right?
Yep.
Or you're determining, can I even work here anymore? So how do you overcome that? And have you seen that reaction as well?
Yeah, and the thing that I have seen mostly is anytime you have them take anything, they consider it a test. And they want to, well, gosh, if I fail, am I going to get fired? And whether it's DISC, whether it's Enneagram, whether it's Working Genius, any of those assessments, there's not a pass-fail. It's just more of an understanding. But what I have to remind myself is this is stuff that really interests me, and I learn a lot about it. But most folks don't.
Yeah.
And so they have no clue what these things really mean or how they're potentially used. So you have to preface all of it with, this isn't pass-fail. This is more understanding who you are.
Yeah.
Whether you call it an assessment, a test, whatever it is.
Inventory.
Yeah.
We should come up with a list of other words to use. But you're right that it's all in the presentation of it, right? That's the galvanizing piece. You need a good galvanizer to go out and rally the troops and say, hey, we're bringing this new thing to the team, because without presenting it properly, it can be a little nerve-wracking for folks. I know I've seen that numerous times at this point. Okay, anything else Working Genius related before I ask you a couple of those other questions that I have to ask every guest?
No, I don't think so. I think the Working Genius is a fantastic way to learn about your team and to make sure that people are just really happy doing whatever their job is.
Yeah, that's a great way to summarize it. Thank you. Okay, you are always learning and growing. Always, right? Every time I talk to you, you've been reading something, listening to a podcast. You're just always, out there trying to improve yourself. So what are you learning right now? What does that look like for you?
What I'm really focused on is how do you retain your employees and how do you retain your customers? And for us at Accrediting, it's members. That's what I've been focused on. I've been focused on reading things about that. There's 2 books by Joey. It's escaping me right now. Give me 1 second, it'll come. Joey Coleman, thank you. And his book is Never Lose Another Customer Again and Never Lose Another Employee Again. And one thing I've realized as I pick books that I feel are good, I feel they're good because they are reaffirming thoughts that I have. It's like, oh yeah, we're on the same page. This is a great book, right? Fantastic book. If it's something I disagree with, it might be a good concept, but I'm like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. So I really have to do a little bit better job of opening my mind to and reading things that I maybe disagree with and say, is there some nuggets of wisdom in here? But really in that, it talks about what are the things you should be doing to show that you appreciate your customers or members, and what are you doing to show that you appreciate your employees. So that's what I've been really focused on lately is learning about that, and then figuring out how do we take this information and now implement it?
Okay, so I'm going to ask, are there any key insights that you've taken away so far that like reaffirmed what you already knew?
Yeah, and there are. One of the things, so for an example, as a financial institution, we give loans out to folks. We take money in, we lend money out. That's, in a nutshell, what we do. And as you lend money out, are we doing things that show the members that we appreciate them, that we appreciate their business, not just at that point of sale, but afterwards? So, for example, big business for us is doing auto lending when a lot of people get new cars and they need loans for those cars. And great, they apply, we approve them, they get the car and they drive home. But did we really show them that we cared about that transaction? We cared about that person. And taking that concept that they have in the book, well, you could do something small like send them a keychain as an example, or maybe send them a coupon for a free oil change, because they're going to have to get an oil change eventually, right? Hopefully they change the oil. And,
this is your reminder, by the way, if you're out there.
Don't do it right away. Wait just a little bit and just kind of put that back out there. And, a lot of folks, they'll put branded stuff out there. It's got, the financial institution's logo and name over it and everything. And that's not for the person. That's not for the member or the customer. That's for the business, right? And that doesn't really show that you really appreciate them and who they are. So giving things like a keychain that has nothing to do with, doesn't have your logo on it. Maybe it's the type of car that they bought, right? It has a little thing. Yeah. Or an oil change has nothing to do with the financial institution. Things like that show you appreciate them, because getting somebody's business and trust is more of a long-term game. It's not short-term. So, gosh, we need loans right now. Let's go out and try and see if somebody wants a loan. Well, you should already be building that over weeks, months, and even years, building those relationships. So when they do need a loan, they've already got that financial institution in mind and saying, this person has really showed over the years that they care about me. This is who I'm going to give them the business, as long as they have competitive rates.
I think that's a great example, and that would stand out as receiving something that seems kind of random, right? But everybody would need.
Right.
I like that. Okay, so that's on the customer or member side. What are you learning about for your own team in your organization, how to retain your team members?
Yeah, and in the book, it really focuses on the onboarding of employees. So, for example, when a new employee starts, one of the examples they give is send that person a video message and say, hey, welcome to the team. It just something simple like that. And there's a lot of different small examples that you can do that say, hey, welcome, we care about you, you're important to us, you're not just another number. Because ultimately, that's what people want. They want to feel like they are special, they're cared about, because if you want them to give their all, including that discretionary effort that they might have, you really want them to feel that they are truly cared for.
Yeah, it reminded me, I was asked to do a webinar for Loudoun County, Virginia, and it was specifically on, I taught the candidate's journey, right? And all the way through employment. So from the moment that you maybe meet them out at a job fair and that first interaction and how you present yourself there, all the way through to offboarding and that experience, right? So that employee's journey from start to finish and retaining them long term. I should show you that and see if it aligns with what you're reading.
Yeah, and what's great, like at Bronco, when I went down there for the interview, we had done a virtual interview and some project work, and then went down for the in-person interview, and it was 4.5 hour drive. So you stayed the night before, and they put you up in a Airbnb, And there was a big basket there when you got there of stuff like
Aw.
peanuts and just all kinds of things.
How did they know you didn't have an allergy, Mike?
Well,
Sorry,
I guess if you're moving down to Virginia, which is like peanut country,
There you go.
You better not have an
There
allergy.
you go.
But that really sent a strong message of, hey, you're special to us. Because not many organizations would have done that, and that's something that we should be doing, not for the CEO position only.
Right.
Every position, right? Are we sending them something saying, hey, welcome to the team, before they even start? That makes a huge difference. And I know the organizations that do, because the employees talk about it.
That's a good point. Well, you had the experience of interviewing at multiple financial institutions, right? So you probably got to see what that experience would have looked like, just even for the interview,
right? How
you were received and welcomed into the interview process. Was there any glaring difference?
Huge differences.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was interesting. Bronco was by far the best process that I had been through. And the others, you kind of felt like you were just another number, right? That they didn't take the time to show that they cared. And to me, that was a huge selling point for going to Bronco.
Well, you ended up at the right place.
Yes.
We said it would all work out, and it did. I'm so happy for you. That's wonderful. Okay, so we always do a branching out challenge.
Yes.
I didn't prep you to think about what you would want to challenge people with, but what do we want to challenge folks with in relation to Working Genius?
Yeah, I think going there and doing the assessment would be a fantastic first start. Right? It's a way to start learning more about yourself and potentially the team that you're on. The assessment itself is inexpensive. I think it's $25 for a person to go through. You can go on to Patrick Lencioni's website or just Google Working Genius assessment, and it'll take you to the website where you can buy the assessment yourself. It takes about 10 minutes to go through it, and then you get the results right away.
Yeah, it's great. And then if you have questions, shoot me your assessment and let's just have a conversation about it. Let's unpack it together.
Yes.
Did I just offer to do that for everyone? Man, you got to reel me in, Mike. Well, I think that's a great challenge. It makes complete sense. And thank you so much for joining me today. I know they don't know, but we're recording another episode to be released later. It's going to be episode 24. And in that episode, we're actually going to start off by explaining how we met one another, because I think it's a fun story. And kind of all of these leadership principles that have made you the leader that you are today. I love that you're continuing to learn and grow all the time. But thank you for sharing, not just today with me, but I always learn something when I speak with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me on. It is quite an honor.
Oh, all right. Well, thank you for sticking through to the very end of this episode. If you found value, please share it with someone that you know. We would love it if you would subscribe so you receive notifications every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time when another episode drops. Until next time, keep branching out.